Final Fantasy has always held a special place in my heart. My very first RPG was actually Final Fantasy VI, all the way back on the SNES. And after playing it, I was hooked. I needed to play them all. But as time went on, the franchise started to lose that prestige that it once had, and I really did start to wonder, could Final Fantasy ever rise back to its former glory? Enter Naoki Yoshida, who was able to transform the dumpster fire that was Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 into one of the best Final Fantasy games in recent years. So what could a team that could achieve that do when given free reign over the next major Final Fantasy? Well, I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XVI since its release, and I've even completed 100% of the achievements. And after doing all that, I think I can answer that question. So let's find out. How does Final Fantasy XVI stack up? We'll do that by breaking this down into 3 sections: story, gameplay, and concluding with performance and presentation. So let's begin with the story. This story immediately got its hooks into me. Those opening few hours were just done so well, and as it progressed, I was invested the whole time. When I learned that the writers watched the first season of Game of Thrones, to get an idea of the tone they were aiming for, man does it show. But I also saw inspirations from animes like Attack on Titan and Dragon Ball Z. In fact, one of my favorite moments in the game was actually this really awesome Dragon Ball Z reference. It had me smiling ear to ear, and it actually gave me goosebumps. And that was just one time where the story did something like that to me. There were also the heartfelt moments that got me teary-eyed, and some truly disturbing moments that actually made me feel sick and uncomfortable. I think a story that can evoke such a wide range of emotions is doing something right. Another critical aspect of story is the world building and the lore. The developers put in a lot of effort so that players could fully immerse themselves in this world. One way that they achieved this is active time lore. You can pause any cutscene, and any person, place, or event mentioned in the scene can be clicked on and then further expanded upon. Now, if you don't want to pause the cutscenes, because that really can break up the tension or the momentum of the scene, well, then you also have an NPC called Hippocrates, and he is basically a compendium of everything that you could view in the active time lore. There is a ton of information here, and you could easily spend hours reading through it all. Another NPC that helps fill out the world is named Vivian. She possesses this incredible interactive map that allows you to explore the realm's history. With a slider, you can even adjust the year and witness all the events that unfolded throughout the realm. It's really cool. It shows you that activities persist even when Clive isn't present, making the world feel dynamic and alive. Vivian also possesses a character relationship chart, again with a slider, so you can adjust the years and see how relationships evolve as the story unfolds. All of this is really great for world building and lore, but the best part is, you don't need to use them to understand the plot. They are just there to help immerse you in the world. So continuing on with characters, I think Final Fantasy XVI has a great cast. I haven't liked a cast this much since Final Fantasy XIV. I thought that Clive was an amazing protagonist. He starts off brooding, but you can understand why. After what he's gone through, it makes total sense. But even though he starts off this way, unlike, say, Squall, Clive grows throughout the story, is still very likable, and has an actual personality. And this version of Sid, he is my favorite to date. He is so charismatic and affable, and you can easily see why Clive and others would follow him and believe in him. Now, since I don't want to spoil anything here, I am limited with what I can say. But I can say this, I thought every big plot character you meet are fantastic. You really understand where they are coming from and their motivations. Even the side characters that you might not expect to get much development get their time to shine. The only criticism I have for the story is that at certain points to progress, there is a lot of running back and forth between NPCs. It can get a little bit tedious when you have to run across the hideaway to talk to one NPC, only then to have to run all the way back to the initial NPC, and then have to run yet again to find another NPC. It felt very similar to how MMOs progress their stories, which I guess makes sense, since this team's other big project is Final Fantasy XIV. Anyways, last but not least, let's talk about the side quest. So while promoting the game, the developers have said their goal was to craft side quests that not only develop characters, but also enrich the world and lore. Now, many of the side quests were opportunities to delve deeper into the lives of main characters and their allies. Even Torgal gets a series of side quests, which were some of my favorites in the game, and its conclusion actually brought tears to my eyes. However, I can't say the same of side quests from random NPCs. Some of them were excellent, but others felt like unnecessary filler. All in all, I think the story was handled very well. I really enjoyed soaking in all the lore, and was genuinely hooked with the plot. The side quests were mostly good, but some of them did feel a little bit like filler. So now let's shift our focus on to the gameplay. Transforming a mainline Final Fantasy title into a fully fledged single-player character action RPG was a bold move, one that has sparked some controversy among fans. I've even seen a question raised: does Final Fantasy XVI leave its old school fans behind? Well, I can't answer that. I am an old school fan, but I was very excited for this game, and I didn't feel left behind. Now, don't get me wrong, I love turn-based JRPGs. My favorite game of all time is Final Fantasy VI, and I am eagerly anticipating upcoming titles in the genre, like Sea of Stars and Super Mario RPG Remastered. But I've also grown to love action RPGs. From Software opened my eyes to the genre, and I've been a fan ever since. So I was not disappointed with this direction. And what else can I say? I really loved the combat. I was already blown away by the demo, and by the end of the game you have 32 abilities that you can play around with. One of my favorite ways to build Clive was aiming for really long air combos. I thought it was a lot of fun, seeing just how long I could juggle an enemy in the air. Or, for enemies that you can't toss into the air, then combining stomps and air combos to see just how long I can wail on them before Clive has to touch down. The only negative is it does take a while to unlock all the icons. Even the second one takes a fair bit of time to get, and you don't unlock the final one until near the end of the game. It's kind of like playing a party-based JRPG, and then the last party member joins you at the end. Chances are very likely that you won't use that character very much. You've already invested so much time and energy into your current party, and I can see that happening with the endgame icons as well. So next up we have the bosses. Final Fantasy XVI has some of the most intense, epic boss encounters that I have ever done. That might sound like hyperbole, but I am being deadly serious. The way that many of these encounters play out was just jaw-dropping. They did an incredible job blending gameplay and cutscenes to deliver some of the most hype moments I've ever encountered in a game. And then you have the gameplay, where every single telegraph is clear and easy to understand, and it feels really good mastering the timing of the different attacks and then punishing them with various counterattacks. And then there are the icon fights. I was already blown away with the Phoenix encounter, and somehow the developers managed to keep escalating them. Each and every icon encounter raises the stakes and surpasses the intensity of the preceding one. And with Soken's music perfectly accompanying them, it's incredible what they pulled off. Now, when it comes to the gameplay of the icon encounters, I was surprised with just how many styles of gameplay that they were able to incorporate in these encounters. I got vibes of Panzer Dragoon, Star Fox, Sonic, beat 'em ups. It really made me look forward to the next encounter to see what they had in store for me. In fact, my favorite moment was from an icon encounter. It was so epic that it almost felt unreal. Now, another big part of the gameplay are the hunts. Part of the enjoyment for me was reading all the entries and then venturing out to track them down. And then when you find them, you get this really cool freeze frame, and it felt very arcadey, which is something I love. The only critique I have with the hunts is that many of them turned out to be enemy types that you've encountered before or would become common later. But they do have altered appearances and new moves to learn, so there is that. I was just hoping that they would use the hunts to introduce brand new enemy types. How cool would it have been to hunt down a cactuar in the desert, or a tonberry in a rune, or maybe a wandering swordsman going around trying to find legendary weapons. So, another critique I've seen with the gameplay is the difficulty. Is Final Fantasy XVI too easy? Well, I think that's pretty hard to quantify. Personally, I didn't struggle very much, but I didn't think it was easy either. To me, easy would mean it takes zero effort to beat, and that wasn't the case at all. It is worth noting that the game does have alternative difficulties. In New Game Plus, you get Final Fantasy mode, which I thought was a pretty decent challenge, and then Ultimaniac takes that challenge to another extreme altogether. So Ultimaniac mode is an arcade-only challenge, where your levels are set, your gear is set, there are no checkpoints, and you have limited potions. So yeah, pretty brutal. With all that being said, I still would love to see the developers add more difficulty options that you can begin the game with. A mode that I would personally love to see is called New Game Minus, which I first saw in Final Fantasy XII Remaster. So in this mode, you start at level 1, and you can no longer gain experience points. I think that would make for a fantastic challenge. So the gameplay is overall very good, but I do have some critiques. The camera, at times, proved to be a formidable adversary, especially during battles in narrow hallways or tight corridors, making it a challenge to maintain visibility and fully grasp the situation. This next one is more of a nitpick, but most of the chests that I found while out exploring didn't feel very rewarding. Opening a chest to find 250 gil or 20 sharp fangs wasn't exactly exciting. Anyways, that's it for gameplay. Let's now move on to performance and presentation. So I played almost exclusively in framerate mode, and even on that setting, I thought that this is one of the best looking games on the PS5. And then the little bit I played in graphic mode makes me really excited to see what the PC version has in store. At any rate, the environments were all stunning, rich in detail and featuring incredible lighting, water, and fog effects. And when it came to the cutscenes, I mean, they were fantastic. Some of the best animations in the industry. The way the characters' skin crinkled around their mouths as they were talking, and around their eyes when reacting to whatever the situation was. It just looked really good. And then there were the way the characters moved around in the scenes, the camera work, the lighting. I'm running out of adjectives of praise here. Now, not every cutscene received that same level of attention. There are many quest cutscenes where the movements are minimal and the camera is static. I'm not saying I expected every single cutscene to have that same quality, just that it did stick out. Let's talk about that music. Masayoshi Soken has risen to be one of my favorite composers, right up there with Nobu Uematsu and Yasunori Mitsuda. So this is an amazing soundtrack that left a huge impression on me. There are so many different styles of music used, including classical, trance, atmospheric, sad piano pieces, and of course, bombastic operatic arrangements. Soken is also a master at crafting music that really gets stuck in your head. I found myself humming so many of these tunes hours after I shut the game off. Titan's theme in particular has been living rent-free in my head ever since I first heard it. So, as for criticisms, a minor one I have is that the game can be way too dark at times. You really need to crank up that brightness. Frame rate is another issue I've seen brought up. Now personally, it never bothered me, but with that being said, there was a noticeable difference between the 60 FPS in combat and the variable FPS in the field. Obviously, I would prefer a smooth 60 FPS all the time, but I guess we have to wait for the PC version for that. So, I think that this was an amazing game. It has some flaws, but they never detracted from my overall enjoyment. It's also a complete game, with a ton of content straight out of the box, and they aren't shoving DLC down your throat. Another big positive is I never ran into any bugs. The game never crashed, which is unfortunately not always true of big AAA releases. So as of today, it's my favorite game of the year. I don't believe in grading video games, so I'll leave it with this. I would highly recommend it, and I think it's worth every penny. Now, to answer that question from the start of the video, how does this one stack up? As of right now, I would put it in my top 5 Final Fantasies, sitting up there with 6, 10, 14, and 5. Now, when it comes to the future, there are a few things I'd love to see, in either future installments or DLC. One such thing is being able to control other party members. How cool would it have been if you could play as Jill or Sid, and they had unique abilities and playstyles? They even sort of teased that at the start of the game, when you controlled Joshua for a short while. I would have also loved to have a super boss or two. I mean, sure, the hunts had some S-tiered encounters, but none were on that level of Omega, or Penance, or Yazmat. And finally, I would love to see gear have more of an impact on the combat, and not just fall into gives you more damage, or reduces a cooldown. Anyways, that'll be all for this one. What did you guys think of Final Fantasy XVI? What would you like to see added? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you saw, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!